special feature.
Pickle.
Hey guys, this is Mike the Birdman here, and welcome out to the always resurrected show here on Twig, and that is Botched Roll. Botched Roll is the show that I dedicate to talking about role-playing games, and while this show has gone through several different iterations over the years, I'm kind of hoping this will kind of be of my open RPG diary, so to speak. For those of you that are new to this, I've been in the role-playing game world since probably 1992, when I first played my first adventure of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons with my friend Jamie. And I've been game mastering on and off since probably about 96, 97, when I started playing Shadowrun 2nd Edition. I started playing Star Wars West End games 2nd Edition, Revised Edition, whatever it is. And then I did Vampire the Masquerade, Hunter the Reckoning. And I really didn't touch a lot of other games for quite some time. And I really didn't get back into role-playing in any serious capacity till my year of postgraduate school, when I was doing PR in Hamilton, when I was at Mohawk. And obviously when Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition came out, Wizards of the Coast sent them to me, and I've been kind of keeping my ear to the ground. Obviously I did Terrible Warriors for a number of years with that podcast, did many hours of campaigns, and I've ran the Cambridge Chronicles. So you might say I've been in the industry for a while. And then most recently this past year, I was hired as a person to work on Star Trek Adventures by the company of Modiphius. So sometimes I review some of the products, but sometimes I also write for them. And I've got several things in the cooker, but I really can't say too much more other than, hey, I'm writing. So on Botched Roll, I'm kind of just sharing my thoughts about the role-playing game process. And right now, I haven't run a proper role-playing game in quite some time. I was running a Shadowrun game and a Dungeons and Dragons game, which someone else picked up the reins from me earlier, either this year or late last year. I can't remember. It feels like it's been forever. One of my friends that I play with here in town, I'll just call him P, and he's been doing a really fantastic job. Like, I created the world, he took the tapestry that I made and he ran with it, and I'm a lot happier being a player than I am being a dungeon master. But certain worlds I'm not comfortable in, most notably Dungeons and Dragons, because I feel like I've got 40 something years of lore. I feel like if I don't share everything that the world has to offer, I'm not doing you as a player the proper service. Like, I want you to have the richest experience possible. So I stepped back, and luckily P was able to step up, and it's been a really good experience. I'm honestly having a friggin' blast doing it. And then my friend B, she invited me to play in her game, which is, again, Dungeons and Dragons. And while I'm not always the most comfortable with swords and sorcery, I've been able to create a character there called Janessa, who is a monk, but is also connected to my other game, which is, again, interesting to create all these tapestries, create these characters, create these intricate backstories for what is essentially fan fiction, but it's still an awful lot of fun. But fantasy is not where I find myself most comfortable. So, my friend B needed some time away, cause she wants to play, and I totally get that. And I've been thinking about doing Botched Roll, resurrecting it, because trying to round the Twig guys up to do a show, especially one that is as involved as a role-playing game, is like herding cats. Nothing against anybody that I work with. Our schedules are just all mixed up, so it's a little bit hard. So doing this show, it's mostly going to be my RPG diary, some random interviews, maybe some extended looks at some books that I have in my collection that I'm going to read over the next couple of months, or until forever, basically. think of this as the RPG book club conversation and whatever else comes to my head. Very stream of consciousness. So let me get back to my original point. So my friend B said she wants to step back, but she wants me to take over as a DM. And you know what? Cool. But I don't want to run Dungeons and Dragons. Again, it's not the world that I'm the most comfortable in. So I pitched all my friends that I'm playing with, a lot of new people to me. And I'm like, okay, what can I do? What worlds do I know that everybody knows? Transformers. Okay, mostly everybody has seen the Michael Bay movies, but you probably don't know what the Matrix of Leadership is, and you know Megatron, maybe Starscream, maybe Soundwave, so probably not the greatest. Shadowrun. I know that world. Lord of the Rings, but with guns. I hope you have an hour or two for me to explain the lore, and that's a commitment to reading, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Star Trek. Everybody knows Captain Kirk, everybody knows Captain Picard, but it's a lot of technobabble, and it's a world that I find it's a lot of investment, and you have to have the right player group to play certain games, and that's no fault of the player, and it's no fault of the DM. Not every game is going to fit you, right? Like, for example, I'm probably not the person to play Bluebeard's Bride, but I might be the person to play Ross's Rifles, Call of Cthulhu, or something along those lines. There are just certain game worlds that I just jive with. So I pitched them about 10 games, and some of the contenders were Fallout, which is, again, that's an awful lot of world setup, but almost everybody's played Fallout 4, plus the Amazon Prime TV shows coming out in, like, I think April or something. And I pitched Walking Dead. And I think I pitched, what else did I pitch? Maybe Power Rangers. Again, 5 teen superheroes with attitude. And the one that got picked was Star Wars. And one of the people that I play with put it perfectly. Everybody knows Star Wars. Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, Empire bad, Darth Vader, big black guy with a lightsaber, Emperor, old man, Death Star, save the day, Rebels good, Empire evil. And okay, cool. So we started talking and we started fleshing out the campaign world. And that's where I found this is where I'm the most comfortable. And I guess this is kind of a pseudo advice thing for DMs as well. And it's Game Master where you're the most comfortable. And don't just play a game to play a game. I mean, obviously, if you want to challenge yourself to learn a new lore like Rifts, or if you want to learn Shadowrun or Monkborg or Forgotten Lands or whatever it is, there's a lot of really interesting games out there, and there's a lot of really good games. But it's a big investment from you as the DM and a big investment from you in your players. And sometimes that can be really rewarding, but let's face it, everybody has a busy life and not everybody has hours upon hours to dedicate into it, despite that heavy burden is now on you as the game master to give them that wonderful experience. But in my experience, and maybe this harkens back to me being a kid, when you play in an established sandbox like Star Wars, you know the players, you know the world, you know the setting. Here are your action figures. What can you do with it? So my players have started coming up with ideas. One of them is going to play kind of a Princess Leia type. Another person wants to play like this mentor Jedi master thing. Another person wants to play kind of like a technician / pilot. And another one may play kind of a bounty hunter or maybe another Jedi character. So I'm like, okay, cool. I can work with this. I really like where this is going. So, luckily there's this really awesome website online. And I think I'm just going to pull it up right now. I think it's called the D6 Holocron or something like this. You might be saying, well, what the hell does that mean? So the D6 Holocron is a website that has every Star Wars West End Games book available for download. I'm actually going to link it in the episode post here. And it's a free resource. These books have not been in print for like decades. And you might be saying, okay, why are you playing such an old system? Well, I don't own the Fantasy Flight one, although you can buy a reprint of this edition, but it's the first edition, or maybe it's the second one. I don't know. Either way, it's not the rules. It's not the rule set I know. And I like older rules because I guess I'm that old guy who yells at clouds, but it's a system that I know, but the setting I'm familiar with. So the setting that I've given these guys is, okay, you're going to be playing post episode 3, so after Order 66, and we're going to be playing before Star Wars Episode 4. So that time period where Rebels happens, Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and to lesser extents, parts of other bits of Star Wars expanded media. I'm also kind of including things from like Legends, some of the new canon that's been established, and kind of making it as familiar yet open as possible. Basically, I want the Empire at the height of their power. I don't want Jedi to be running around everywhere, but probably more so now than during the era of the Rebellion, because it makes more sense. There's probably more Jedi survivors of Order 66 in the immediate years after Order 66, as opposed to 20 years when the Death Star is completed and Alderaan is going to be blown up at some point. So this is the sandbox that I've created. And I guess a lot of this experience, it's going to boil down to finding my love of game mastering again. And it stands at a very interesting time because, like I said, now that I'm a writer for an RPG, it's learning to love the property again. And Star Wars has normally been very, very good to me. I liked Ahsoka for the most part, but I had problems with it. Mostly because I read a lot of the Timothy Zahn novels for the Heir to the Empire stuff. But when I played Jedi Survivor this year for review, I fell in love with Star Wars again. But I didn't love Andor. Now, that being said, I haven't finished it yet, so I'm just going to do that during my Christmas break here, and maybe I'll find some new ideas for this role-playing game, because we're not launching until January or so. I've just got way too many deadlines. So when I came up with this idea for this game, everybody seems super excited, and now it's my goal as the game master to make sure I can walk everybody through character creation. Though there are some pretty wonderful tools online for some older games, because as far as I know, there's still quite a strong fan community out there on Reddit. There's other websites that are dedicated towards putting resources into developing new Star Wars D6 material. In fact, I know there's an Ahsoka Tano book that several people have contributed to, which I think is friggin' awesome. There's even a book on cybernetics now. Again, this is not something we got during the West End Games era. There's even books for Rebels seasons 1 and 2. And I'm 99% sure there's one for Rogue One. So all my guys have the material, but it's up to me to teach them. But the bonus side here is I'm not having to teach them the setting and world. So I'm feeling a lot more comfortable just teaching them the mechanics. It is an older system, but it's an older code, and it checks out, you might say. And I'm excited to tell a new Star Wars story. In fact, I'm actually going to read to you guys what I have as my new intro for them. And I haven't, I've called it temporarily Star Wars Mercenaries. So the opening crawl, I actually found a place where you can generate your own Star Wars crawl, and I uploaded it to a private thing, and these guys viewed it, and they were just over the moon by it. And I can pay someone $10 to make me a professional version of it. And maybe once a month I might do it for these guys, because I think they'd get a real kind of kick out of it. So the opening crawl, it says, the powerful galactic empire rules with an iron fist over a fearful galaxy still healing from the wounds of the Clone Wars. Rumors of rebellion are whispered across the stars, but few dare take up arms against the Imperial Army and the evil Emperor Palpatine. Opportunists, criminals, and mercenaries and heroes hide among the space lanes waiting for the right moment. On the Imperial world of Helen, Moff Tennant oversees the construction of a new naval shipyard and awaits orders from Darth Vader himself. So I've already kind of given these guys the setup for this thing. So the setup for my world is going to be the Imperial world of Hellion, which I've set up sort of outside of the core worlds, like in the mid-rim, pretty close to the corporate sector authority. And it's a world that will be the initial test bed for the first generation of Super Star Destroyers. Like, in my own headcanon, I don't know whether this is accurate to the books or not, but I figure if the Death Star is still moderately under construction right now, the Imperial and Victory Star Destroyers are being used and are still fairly in service at this time, it would make sense that they would probably be prototyping the Super Star Destroyers, which is Darth Vader's ship from the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back. So like, okay, that gives me my setting. Moff Tenant, I developed him as kind of this crazy Imperial scientist, not stable enough to work on the Death Star, but smart enough to develop the next generation of stuff that would be used by the everyday rank and file, high-ranking Imperial officer. So, like here, you can design the aircraft carrier, but you're not going to design the stealth bomber, so to speak. So, Emperor Palpatine's kind of got that kind of setup. And I kind of decided to give him a little bit of flavor. So, if I remember in the Clone Wars, there are certain worlds that are basically foundry worlds where they would like develop new types of droids. They would just be pumping things out day and night. The worlds are essentially factories, turning the worlds into basically husks by taking all the precious resources. So on the one world that I designed, basically a out of control droid AI took over the planet, killed everybody on it, and Tennant may or may not be responsible for that. So the planet was glassed by the Imperial fleet under the guise of it was a runaway environmental disaster. They were worried about it spreading, and unfortunately it was a tragic loss of life, blah, 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 Imperial propaganda. It needed to be done. So Tennant's dangerous, and I'm kind of taking this idea from the idea of like open AI right now, as everybody considers to be the next dangerous thing that's being developed, and I can't say that I disagree with it. So I kind of get the pull from real world kind of headlines, but if I wanted to draw like a Skynet kind of parallel, I probably could. And I know there are rogue AI that are in Star Wars. I know, for example, IG-88 uploaded his consciousness. I think it was the book Tales of the Bounty Hunters. If you remember that from Star Wars Legends, they do talk about that a little bit. So I've got ideas to make this world a little bit more interesting. So Hellion, I've also kind of designed it as like a city planet. So think of it kind of a cross between Coruscant and Corellia. Heavily industrial, but a planet of commerce, where basically I've kind of set it up as like maybe Star Wars Shadowrun might be kind of a good place to describe it. Basically, Imperial tech is developed here, but is also often smuggled out, sold to privateers, sold to the corporate sector authority, and sold to any of maybe the Hutts are involved. And I'm trying to build out their world to have as many layers to it as possible. Because one of the things I did when I created Shadowrun, which was a game that I never broadcast on Twig, but I ran for these guys. I created the fictional world of what Toronto might look like in 2454. And basically I had it set just before the election that year. I think that was the year Dunklazan was elected. I don't know. I'm probably wrong. But I had threads there for like insect shamans, toxic shamans. I had the Ghoul Town, which I think I had set in like Greek Town. If you happen to live in the area, you know exactly where I'm kind of talking about. For the Imperial world of Hellion, I called it Star Wars Detroit. And I may introduce stuff from like other popular media, like I've got stats for other characters from other fictional properties that have been adapted to D6. And I got some pretty neat ideas for what I want to do, but I've started to develop some NPC characters. And again, I will read you some of these guys just because I'm really proud of how they're kind of turning out. so far. So the characters that I've created, these are some of the NPCs. The first character I created was a friendly NPC. He's called RC or 26, occasionally known under the codename Frag. A mysterious operative often employed by various elements on Hellion against Imperial interests, will work against the Hutts and is known to be sympathetic to the rebellion. No one has seen their face as they wear a full suit of armor with a pressurized helmet. No one even is certain of their species. A skilled saboteur and infiltration specialist is suspected to be working out of the Hellion system asteroid belt, but reports are unconfirmed. To even contact them costs 1,000 credits for a one-way message that may never be answered. However, their success record means they're often in demand. So that's the first person that I developed. That's going to be probably my game master character, aka their get out of jail free card, should they need someone to push the plot along. But at the same time, I'm not married to this person. I don't want to give away too much about them just in case these guys do happen to listen. But I got a pretty cool idea if this goes the way that I want. Even if it doesn't, it can be a nice tragedy in the making. So if they need to have beloved character X gets, sticks their finger in the socket, well, God rest poor RC's soul. And then the next character, again, kind of taking a cue from the Shadowrun design book. Basically, I needed a fixer, but I didn't want to go with just a Hutt. I didn't want to go with a Devorian, which is like the devil-looking guys. I wanted to go with Aduros. Aduros think of them as the Star Wars version of the Grey aliens or the Asgardians from Stargate. So this guy I called Curve, and I called him Curve because I was just watching The Crow, City of Angels, and I just thought it was cool. I may model this guy somewhat against like Iggy Pop from that movie, so I don't know. I still haven't decided 100% on Curve's personality. So I've described him as this: a Duros criminal who helps find odd jobs for those on Hellion who aren't Imperial or corporate sector allied. Curve is no friend to the local Hutt, but maintains a, quote, peace treaty of credits, information, and the occasional ship that will get busted by customs. A big believer in as long as the mag train runs on time, it's none of my concern. Accompanied by a pair of super battle droid bodyguards and his personal assistant, a woman whose name is unknown to all but Curve, commands a small pirate corvette with a small cadre of starfighters, but never risks open conflict within the sector as Hellion is too important to him. So the idea of picking super battle droids, again, I wanted to bring in that familiar Clone Wars thing, because a lot of my group has seen the Clone Wars television series. The droids have been featured in episode 2 and episode 3, and I think they're in The Mandalorian at one point, and they're definitely in Jedi Survivor. And there's a mission that actually happens in Jedi Survivor where you go inside a crashed Confederate Systems drop ship that was like a droid factory. So I thought the idea of a lot of old Sith tech lying around after the Clone Wars, that makes an awful lot of sense to me. Plus, I love the idea of the Techno Union and the banking clans. So maybe I can work out some kind of an element there, because like I want to pull from all these different areas for Star Wars. I want these guys to have such a rich experience. And I told them when they're creating characters, and I really think I overwhelmed them with this. They're like, Mike, is anything off limits? No. As long as you can explain it and give it to me within reason, I'm going to allow it. I really hope no one says they want to play a Night Sister, but if you can give me a reason for it, and if it sounds cool, if it fits within quote unquote canon, fine. I remember telling this story years ago, but I remember I had one guy who played an Ewok and somehow managed to burn down Endor. But we also killed Boba Fett with a single thermal detonator and totally detonated Slave One and everything. So one of the things I'm going to do, and I'm taking this advice from someone I've known for quite some time, it's never put Darth Vader in your game. And you're going to say, but Mike, you've already immediately mentioned Darth Vader in your opening crawl. Well, of course, you want it to feel Star Wars, but something I actually learned from B, and I'm really glad that she's done this. I think it's a wonderful game master technique and not something I've ever done personally, is the idea of cutscenes. Something that happens where, yes, you are going to have to talk to yourself, but you're about to play out a scene. So I'm always going to have the Imperial threat be present. Like maybe I'll have a scene where Darth Vader meets the Emperor, or when Darth Vader arrives to Moff Tennant to demand updates on the Emperor's new flagship or whatever. I'm going to do that. And if I can find characters who are alive at this time, will they ever run across Obi-Wan Kenobi? Probably not, because as far as I know, he doesn't leave Coruscant, or not Coruscant, he doesn't leave Tatooine too often because he's looking after Luke. But that's not to say they couldn't end up on Tatooine for some reason, because every Star Wars game has to go there at some point. But I want to create different worlds. I want to give them this really rich experience and give them the things that you saw on the Clone Wars, you saw on Rebels. Give them something different. Like something that The Mandalorian has done really well is giving us different slices of the galaxy, as it were. I mean, the Bounty Hunters Guild. In fact, to talk about Bounty Hunters for just a minute, West End Games has a awesome source book, which you can read on this website, that talks about bounty hunters, how the guild works, how it functions. There's tons of different technology in there. There's lots of great game master characters. I think characters like Dengar are around. IG-88, I'm pretty sure, is around at this time. And now that we've seen what that Imperial series assassin droid can do from the first season of Mando, maybe why not? I could introduce one. Is he going to be as quirky and as fun-loving? No, he'll be a major threat at some point, but that's cool. I can do that. I can invent my own characters now that I know, because in the old Star Wars, Mandalorian armor was very hard to come by. It's still very hard to come by in the Mandalorian area because of Beskar, which is highly reflective of the blaster fire, and I'm pretty sure someone has already put Mando stats out. I know there's a group on Reddit, I think they're called the Maw Installation, and someone's put Beskar stats out there. So I'm not going to have my players running around in full Beskar. If they do, they better have a goddamn good reason for it. And again, the Empire pretty much glassed Mandalore. So you're not exactly friend to the Empire, but they also recognize that you are of a particular skill set, shall we say. That's another thing too. A lot of things that's not really played up in Star Wars, at least on the screen, but heavily implied in comic books and other pieces of fiction, is the Empire is extremely xenophobic and extremely sexist. Like, I remember when I was a kid, growing up, one of the big threats was a character named Admiral Dalla. Admiral Dalla was stationed at the Maw installation, which is where the prototype Death Star laser, like the prototype Death Star superstructure, was kept, which is inside all these black holes. Again, I am so using that at some point. But that's a woman character, and she outsmarted a number of the rebellion heroes. I think she killed General Durlin, actually. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember that book. Oh, well, I think that was the Dark Saber book. I know it wasn't Truce at Bakura, but anyway. Stuff like that. And obviously with Grand Admiral Thrawn being a very high-ranking alien in this time. Now, according to canon, he's off in the unknown regions thanks to Ezra Bridger. So I don't have Thrawn at my disposal, but I would have Captain Pellon, who was like his right-hand man, and he commanded the Imperial Remnant after the loss of the fleet. Moff Gideon would, I guess he wouldn't, I don't know how old he'd be at this point, but I could bring in younger versions of certain characters. I just have to make sure that the timelines fairly match up. I mean, he wouldn't be a Moff this time, maybe General Gideon or something. I don't know. But I don't know. This is a world that I'm so excited to do something in. And having an open forum here, a dialogue, even if it's only one way, is exciting, that I can share my thoughts, put them out into the ether. And I know you, the listeners of Twig, are hopefully going to enjoy this as I chronicle what happens with these guys. Like, I've got a husband and wife team, my friend B, my friend P, another person named A, and yeah, that's a good group. And these are all people I've known for probably about a year, maybe a little bit more. I've only been playing with the one group less than 6 months, but we have fun every Thursday night, and that's something too. I've rediscovered my love of role-playing. I mean, I love creating. I do. When I got hired by Modifius, it was literally a random chance. Can I create? And I have done some stuff. Again, can't say too much about it just due to, stuff. But I'm starting to discover why I love science fiction. And there's something so exciting about it. And I rediscovered some love too. Earlier this year, I attended a convention called GriffCon, which is a local convention that is thrown by the University of Guelph. And I ran a 3-day campaign with 3 total strangers to teach a brand new system to. I taught them the Renegade Game Studios Transformers. And I gave them a alternate what-if scenario to the Transformers movie that takes one day before, literally, when you see the line in the movie when Optimus Prime says, "We don't have enough Energon cubes to power a full-scale assault. We need to make a run to Autobot City." I set that game literally. They were the Autobot commando unit that made sure that shuttle could take off without incident, to make sure Megatron, Soundwave, and Shockwave didn't find them. And it ended with Dark Energon, Trypticon eating Megatron, and then controlling Trypticon as he was supposed to attack Autobot City, but he turned on the Decepticons and saved the day. And now there's a new Herald of Unicron to be continued this April if my players come back. Otherwise, I might run Power Rangers this year. I'm not 100% sure. But this year has taught me a lot about learning to love what you do. And don't just game or play or GM for the sake of doing it. I find, at least in my experience, is when you're game mastering, you have to do it for yourself too. I mean, you're not just there to play entertaining monkey. And there are professional services for that. And I've even thought about launching one on Patreon a number of years ago. My friend Jen developed one, and I know Terrible Warriors used to do it with the guy Justin. But I was never comfortable committing to that. And I think I ran a couple of Patreon games, but it wasn't my jam. I like doing it for free, but I have to do it for me to fulfill some storytelling element. And in the most ideal world, I would love to work on the Star Wars property. Star Trek's a pretty nice number too. I'll take that. I'm a little worried I'm not as smart as some of the guys who wrote DS9 and Voyager, but I have to remember, I'm just starting out. And eventually I'm going to grow to love it. And I've definitely learned a lot about telling emotional stories now that I'm creating these characters. Like maybe the next time I do one of these botched rolls, I'm going to tell you about my characters of Suvi Ravensong, Janessa Fox Dancer, and Kyla, I can't remember what her last name is. It's going to bother me. But yeah, a pair of them are monk sisters from a order I called the Cloakwood Monks. And another one is a shapeshifter who was kicked out of Ravenloft and is running from the guilt of having lost her love. And the dark powers exiled her. But for what reason? To do what? And now things are starting to come to a head. So things are turning into all these wild and crazy directions. And it's because I got a chance to take a break and be a player. Now that I'm becoming a GM again, I'm feeling re-energized. So will I ever come back to Game Master Dungeons and Dragons? Yeah, maybe. I I just don't know if it's going to be for a while. I mean, I like being able to test drive stuff with my group when I get stuff sent from Wizards of the Coast, because I do read everything, and I do love to see how well this would fit in my games. But I know playing with the material, like there's some really good stuff in the Big B's Book of Giants. I really enjoy that. The Planescape stuff, what more can I say? The Lady of Pain. So there's going to be a lot of really cool stuff coming up on Botched Roll. And just the fact that I'm not having to put together a 4 to 8 hour show with Alex, JT, and Ken, which again, it's such a stress on me, but I know those guys, they would love to play, but do it for fun. And that's what ultimately role-playing should be. It should be for fun. If you can make a career out of it, wonderful. I've been very fortunate to be offered an opportunity, and hopefully I can meet all my deadlines. I'm looking forward to it. But I'm looking forward just to playing with a group of people who don't really know me, a group of people where I can just freely be Mike, not Birdman. And that's something else too. I don't get a chance to just live in a different skin. Like, there's always the performer. Very few people know me as Mike. And I like to think over the years of Twig, you get a good mix. You see the louder than life host of Loose Cannon, Future Imperfect, blah, 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 blah. But how often do you see Mike, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, Mike is there. Michael is in there, and he doesn't get a chance to come out and play in his most comfortable skin sometimes. There's always an aura of performance, a mask, if you will. I don't know. Maybe I've been playing too much Persona. I don't know. But anyway, I am thankful that I get a chance to talk Star Wars again. I'm going to talk about Star Trek and talk about some of my creative process and how I'm creating that. I can tell you I'm watching DS9 right now, which I'm getting a lot of really cool ideas from that. Because as much as I love Captain Janeway, I got to respect Commander Benjamin Sisko and see what he goes through. So anyway, so for this edition of Botched Roll, I hope you will all roll with advantage and get yourselves some nat 20s. I'll catch you guys again next time, right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.